In Florida, you can go to jail for eating a frog that died during a frog jumping contest. And that's not even the weirdest food law we found. America has over 300,000 laws on the books. And buried deep in dusty legal archives across all 50 states are food laws so bizarre they'll make you question everything. We're talking about regulations that could turn your Sunday breakfast into a federal crime. Laws that make absolutely zero sense in 2025 but are still technically enforceable. Today we're diving into 50 of the freakiest food laws that are somehow still active in America. And trust me, number 37 is going to blow your mind. But real quick, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because 95% of you watching aren't subscribed yet. Drop a like and comment which law sounds the most insane to you. Here's the thing about American law. We love making rules, like we really love it. But we're terrible at getting rid of old ones. So what happens is you end up with this massive collection of outdated, forgotten, and downright weird regulations that nobody bothered to remove from the books. And when it comes to food, things get especially strange. These laws were written decades or even centuries ago when society was completely different. But legally speaking, they're still active. Which means technically, you could be breaking the law right now and not even know it. So let us get into these 50 freaky food laws and figure out how America ended up with such a bizarre legal system when it comes to what we eat. Let's start with the classics. In Alabama, it's illegal to carry an ice cream cone in your back pocket. Now you might be thinking, who even does that? And you'd be right to ask. But this law actually has a historical reason. Back in the 1800s, horse thieves would put ice cream in their back pockets to lure horses away from their owners. The horse would follow the sweet smell, and boom, the thief could claim the horse just followed them. So Alabama made it illegal. The funny part, the law never specified which pocket. So technically, front pocket ice cream is totally fine. Back pocket, criminal activity. Moving to Alaska, it's illegal to give alcohol to a moose. Yes, you read that right. Someone, at some point in Alaska's history, thought it was necessary to write into law that you cannot get a moose drunk. Which means it definitely happened. Multiple times, probably got so out of hand that legislators sat down and said we need to make this official. Now you might be wondering if this counts as a food law since we're talking about beverages. And the answer is yes, because alcohol consumption laws fall under food and beverage regulations. Also, can you imagine the chaos of a drunk moose? Those things weigh up to 1,500 pounds and they're aggressive even when sober. In Arizona, you can't feed garbage to pigs without a permit. This one actually makes some sense from a public health perspective because feeding untreated garbage to pigs can spread diseases. But the funny part is how specific the law is. You need an actual government-issued permit to feed your trash to a pig, which means there's a whole permitting process. Forms to fill out. Probably fees to pay. Also, you can give your leftover pizza to a pig. Arkansas has a law that says the Arkansas River cannot be raised higher than the Main Street Bridge in Little Rock. Now, this isn't directly about food, but it affects food production because that river is crucial for agriculture and the fishing industry in the state. The law was written to protect businesses along the river, but it's worded so strangely that it sounds like they're commanding the river itself to obey. Like the river is going to read the legal code and think, oh, okay, I better not rise too high today. California has so many weird food laws we could do an entire video just on that state. But here's one of the best. In Los Angeles, it's illegal to lick a toad. Why? Because certain toads secrete psychedelic substances from their skin, and people were literally licking toads to get high. So law said, nope, we're making this illegal. The law specifically mentions that you cannot consume or lick any toad species, which raises the question of how they enforce this. Is there a dedicated toad-licking police unit? Do they stake out ponds at night waiting to catch people in the act? In Connecticut, a pickle must bounce to officially be considered a pickle. This is a real law that's still on the books. Back in the 1800s, two guys were arrested for selling pickles that weren't fit for human consumption. The health inspector tested the pickles by dropping them, and if they didn't bounce, they were considered too soft and therefore rotten. The law stayed in place, which means Connecticut has an official legal definition of what makes a pickle, the bounce test. And yes, people have tested this. A proper pickle will bounce. Delaware makes it illegal to sell perfume and whiskey at the same store on Sundays. This is one of those old blue laws designed to enforce religious observance of the Sabbath. But why perfume and whiskey specifically? Nobody knows. You can sell other things. Just not that combination. On a Sunday, any other day, go crazy. Sell all the perfume and whiskey you want. But Sunday, that's where Delaware draws the line. Florida is a goldmine for weird laws, and we've got several from the Sunshine State. First up, that frog law we mentioned earlier. In Florida, it's illegal to eat a frog that dies during a frog jumping contest. Frog jumping contests are apparently common enough in Florida that they needed legislation about what happens when a frog doesn't make it. And someone must have tried to eat one because that's the only reason you write this into law. Hey, free protein, right? Wrong. That's illegal protein in Florida. Also in Florida, unmarried women can't parachute on Sundays. Now, this isn't directly about food, but it affects Sunday brunch plans if you re a skydiving enthusiast who happens to be single and female. The law was apparently designed to protect women from making rash decisions on the Lord's Day, because obviously, being married somehow makes parachuting on Sunday more acceptable. Georgia has a law that says you can't eat fried chicken with a fork, specifically in Gainesville, which calls itself the poultry capital of the world. The law was passed in 1961 as a publicity stunt to promote Gainesville's chicken industry. But here's the thing, it's still technically on the books. And yes, someone actually got arrested for it in 2009 as a joke for a publicity event. The charges were dropped, obviously, but the law remains. So if you're in Gainesville, Georgia, eating your fried chicken, you better use your hands or risk becoming a criminal. Hawaii makes it illegal to place coins in your ears. Why is this a food law? Because coins in ears was apparently a way people tried to scam vending machines and food vendors. By placing coins in their ears, they could pretend to pay while actually keeping their money. So Hawaii said no more ear coins. This law is so specific that it really makes you wonder how big of a problem this was. Like how many people were doing this before they had to actually legislate it. Idaho's very serious about its potatoes. There's actually a law requiring that all packages of potatoes sold in Idaho meet certain quality standards. Which sounds reasonable until you realize the law is so strict that you can technically be fined for selling an ugly potato. It has to meet specific size, shape, and quality requirements. Because Idaho's reputation depends on potato excellence, and they are not messing around. An ugly potato is a crime against the state's identity. Illinois has a law that says you must smile at all times while eating in public in the city of Pocatello. This was passed in 1948 during an especially harsh winter when everyone was apparently too grumpy. The city council decided the solution was to legally mandate smiling. So if you're having a bad day and eating a sandwich in Pocatello with a frown on your face, you're technically breaking the law. How they'd enforce this is anybody's guess. Smile police, frown detectors. In Indiana, it's illegal to sell cold beverages on Sunday before noon. Another blue law holdover. You can sell hot coffee. You can sell food, but cold drinks, not until the clock strikes 12. The reasoning was religious. Keep the Sabbath morning sacred. But in practice, it just means gas stations and convenience stores have to cover up their cold drink coolers until noon on Sundays, or at least they're supposed to. Most places ignore it, but the law is still technically active. Iowa takes butter very seriously. There's a law that makes it illegal to pass off margarine as real butter, which sounds reasonable for consumer protection. But the law goes further. Restaurants that serve margarine must display a notice in a conspicuous place informing customers that margarine, not butter, is being served. The notice has to be in specific font sizes. This is a state that does not play games when it comes to dairy authenticity. Kansas has a law that makes it illegal to serve wine in teacups. This goes back to Prohibition era when people tried to disguise alcohol by serving it in innocent-looking containers like teacups. The law stayed on the books even after Prohibition ended. So in Kansas, your wine must be in a proper wine glass. Teacups are for tea only. To do otherwise is to break the law, even in 2025. Kentucky requires that every person must take a bath at least once per year. Now this isn't specifically about food, but it affects food service workers, right? If you're handling food, probably should bathe more than once a year. But technically, as long as you hit that annual bath, you're legally in the clear in Kentucky. Just one bath per calendar year. That's the legal minimum for hygiene. Louisiana prohibits the robbing of banks and then shooting at the bank teller with a water pistol. But more relevant to our topic, Louisiana also has a law about crawfish. It's illegal to steal someone else's crawfish, which might sound obvious, but the law gets specific. If you're caught stealing more than $1.50 worth of crawfish, it's considered felony theft. Louisiana takes its crawfish seriously. This is a state where seafood theft is defined by specific dollar amounts in the legal code. Maine has a law that you can't step out of a plane while it's in flight. Okay, this one isn't about food either, but stay with me. Maine also has a law that lobsters must be measured, and if they're too small or too large, you can't keep them. The small ones need to grow. The large ones are breeding stock. So Maine has a legal size window for lobster consumption. Outside that window, illegal lobster. And yes, lobster police check. They will measure your lobster. Maryland makes it illegal to take a lion to the movies. Not food related, but here's one that is. In Baltimore, it's illegal to take your snacks into the movie theater if they were UNT purchased at the theater. Most theaters have this as a policy, but in Baltimore, there's actually an old law backing it up. So sneaking candy from the dollar store into a Baltimore movie theater isn't just against theater rules, it's against city law. Massachusetts prohibits tomatoes in clam chowder. Wait, no, let me correct that. That's not technically illegal. but there is such intense cultural opposition to it that some people think it should be. What is illegal in Massachusetts is selling food on Sunday in some municipalities without proper licensing. More blue laws. But the tomato and clam chowder thing is so controversial that Manhattan clam chowder versus New England clam chowder has caused actual arguments in the state legislature. Michigan has a law that makes it illegal for a woman to cut her own hair without her husband's permission. This is from 1849 and is obviously not enforced, but it's technically still on the books. More relevant to food, Michigan also requires that any restaurant selling frog legs must have a special permit, and the frogs must be from approved sources. You can't just go catch pond frogs and serve them. There's a whole regulatory process for legally acceptable frog legs. Minnesota prohibits crossing state lines with a duck on your head. But for actual food laws, Minnesota requires that margarine must be a different color than butter to avoid confusion. They went the opposite direction from Iowa. Instead of requiring notices, they just said, make margarine look different. Most margarine is naturally white or pale, so yellow dye gets added to make it look more butter-like. But in Minnesota, that's legally problematic. Keep your margarine clearly distinguishable from butter or face consequences. Mississippi makes it impossible to teach others about polygamy. Not food-related, but Mississippi does have a law that all restaurants must serve grits. I'm kidding, that's not real. But what is real is that Mississippi has some of the strictest laws about food truck locations. Food trucks can't operate within certain distances of established restaurants in some counties. It's protectionist legislation disguised as zoning laws, but it's definitely still enforced. Missouri has a law in Kansas City that says you can't buy a hat on Sunday. Why? Blue laws, again. But Kansas City also has regulations about barbecue that are taken extremely seriously. While not technically laws, the city's health code has specific requirements for smoking meat that are stricter than most other cities. Because Kansas City barbecue is serious business, and the city's reputation depends on maintaining standards. Montana makes it illegal to have a sheep in the cab of your truck without a chaperone. For food laws, Montana also has interesting regulations about game meat. If you hunt an animal, there are strict laws about how much of the meat you must use. You can't just take the trophy parts and waste the meat. You must process and use a certain percentage, or you can be charged with wasting game, which is a criminal offense. Nebraska has a law that bars can't sell beer unless they're also making soup. This is another old law that was probably designed to make bars look more like restaurants for licensing purposes. The law doesn't specify what kind of soup or how much soup, so some bars in Nebraska technically keep a pot of soup on hand just to comply with this bizarre requirement. Could be instant ramen for all the law cares. As long as soup is available, beer can be sold. Nevada allows almost everything, but here's something that's technically regulated. If you're operating a buffet in Nevada, which is common in casinos, there are strict time limits on how long food can sit out. The health code is extremely specific about this because buffets are such a big part of Nevada's tourism industry. Food poisoning from a buffet could tank a casino's reputation, so the state doesn't mess around with buffet regulations. New Hampshire's state motto is live free or die, but you still can't collect seaweed at night. This old law was designed to prevent people from stealing kelp and seaweed that washed ashore, which was valuable for fertilizer and other uses. The law specifies nighttime collection is illegal, which means daytime seaweed collecting is totally fine. So if you want that seaweed, set your alarm early and get it during legal hours. New Jersey has a law that you can't slurp your soup in public. This was actually a local ordinance in some New Jersey towns designed to maintain public decorum. Whether it's still enforced is questionable, but it's technically on the books. New Jersey also has some of the strictest regulations about what can legally be called a bagel. There are specific requirements about ingredients and preparation methods. New Jersey bagels are not to be trifled with. New Mexico requires that idiots cannot vote. That's actually in their constitution, though the definition of idiot is a very old legal term that's not used anymore. For food, New Mexico has laws requiring that all chile served in the state must specify whether it is red or green. Okay, that's not technically a law, but you will get asked, red or green, when ordering New Mexican food, and choosing is basically mandatory by cultural law, if not legal law. New York has laws that every bagel sold must be hand-rolled to be called a New York bagel. Actually, that's not true. But New York does have regulations about hot dog cart locations that are incredibly complex. Getting a permit to sell hot dogs in certain locations in Manhattan can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. The most expensive hot dog cart permit is right outside the Central Park Zoo and costs over $200,000 annually. North Carolina makes it illegal to sing off-key. Not directly food-related, but North Carolina also has laws about barbecue that people take very seriously. There are regulations about what can be called Carolina barbecue, and while not strictly enforced, purists will absolutely call you out for violations. Vinegar-based sauce is the law, at least by cultural standards. Tomato-based sauce is for other states. North Dakota has a law that makes it illegal to fall asleep with your shoes on. But for food, North Dakota requires that all bison meat sold commercially must be inspected by the USDA. Since bison are not technically cattle, they fall under different regulations. North Dakota produces a lot of bison meat, so these regulations are actually actively enforced, unlike some of the weirder laws on this list. Ohio makes it illegal to get a fish drunk. Similar to Alaska's moose law, someone in Ohio was apparently giving alcohol to fish, and it became enough of a problem that they had to legislate it. Why anyone would do this is a mystery. But it's illegal. Don't get your fish drunk in Ohio. Just don't do it. Keep your alcohol away from the aquarium. Oklahoma has a law that dogs must have a permit to gather in groups of 3 or more on private property. For food laws, Oklahoma requires that watermelon must be sold whole, not by the slice. In certain counties, this was designed to prevent vendors from cutting open melons and selling bad fruit by the slice, while hiding the quality. If you're buying a whole watermelon, you can see what you're getting. Slice sales were apparently rife with fraud at some point. Oregon requires that all dishes washed in a restaurant must be air-dried, not towel-dried. This is an actual health code requirement designed to prevent contamination from dirty towels. It's one of the stricter dishwashing regulations in the country. Oregon takes food safety seriously, probably because of the state's reputation for foodie culture and farm-to-table dining. Pennsylvania has a law that you can't catch a fish with your mouth. Yes, someone tried it, probably multiple someones. It became enough of an issue that Pennsylvania said absolutely not. Use a fishing rod like a normal person. Catching fish with your mouth is now illegal. This is the kind of law that makes you really wonder about the backstory. What happened to necessitate this? Rhode Island makes it illegal to throw pickle juice on a trolley. This is such a specific law that there must be an amazing story behind it. Someone, at some point, was throwing pickle juice on trolleys in Rhode Island, and it became such a problem that the state legislature convened and said this ends now. No more pickle juice on public transportation. The law remains active. South Carolina requires that fortune tellers must pay a special business license fee. Not directly about food, but fortune cookies contain fortunes, so we're counting it. South Carolina also has regulations about boiled peanuts, which are a big deal in the state. If you're selling boiled peanuts commercially, there are health code requirements about temperature and storage that are stricter than for regular peanuts. South Dakota makes it illegal to fall asleep in a cheese factory. This is a real law, and the reasoning is probably related to safety and sanitation. Can't have workers napping among the aging cheese, but the specificity of it is hilarious. Not factories in general, not food processing plants. Specifically cheese factories. Someone fell asleep in a cheese factory, and South Dakota said never again. Tennessee has a law against sharing your Netflix password. That's recent, and not about food. But Tennessee also requires that any establishment serving alcohol must also serve food. This is designed to prevent bars from becoming too bar-like and to maintain the appearance of restaurants. The law doesn't specify how much food or what kind. Just that food must be available. Texas has a law in the city of Lubbock where it's illegal to drive within an arm's length of alcohol, including alcohol in stores. But statewide, Texas has the Texas tamale law. This is real. There are specific regulations about how tamales can be sold, and home-based tamale businesses have special permissions that other home food businesses don't have, because tamales are that important to Texas culture. Utah has some of the strangest alcohol laws in the country. Beer sold in grocery stores can't exceed a certain alcohol content. Any beer stronger than that must be sold in state-run liquor stores. This makes Utah one of the few states where the government has a monopoly on certain alcoholic beverages. The reasoning is religious, given Utah's large Mormon population, but it creates some bizarre shopping experiences. Vermont requires that all maple syrup sold as Vermont maple syrup must actually be from Vermont and meet strict grading standards. This is actively enforced. Vermont maple syrup is a protected designation. You can't just bottle corn syrup and call it Vermont maple. The state will come after you. There are actually maple syrup police. Well, inspectors. But still, Virginia makes it illegal to spit on the sidewalk. Not directly food-related, but Virginia also has laws about oyster harvesting that are incredibly detailed. There are specific seasons, specific areas, and specific size requirements. Oysters are big business in Virginia, especially in the Chesapeake Bay area, and the state protects that industry with extensive regulations. Washington state makes it illegal to paint polka dots on the American flag. But for food, Washington has interesting regulations about coffee. Given that Seattle is the birthplace of Starbucks and coffee culture, there are actually health code requirements specific to coffee shops that don't apply to other food service businesses. Things like espresso machine cleaning schedules and milk steaming temperature requirements. West Virginia has a law that whistling underwater is illegal. Nobody knows why, but West Virginia also has regulations about roadkill. Yes, seriously. If you hit a deer with your car, you're allowed to take it home and eat it, but you have to report it and get a permit. West Virginia has official roadkill permits. This is a real thing. Free venison just requires paperwork. Wisconsin is very serious about cheese. There are laws about what can be called Wisconsin cheese, and the state has cheese grading standards that exceed federal requirements. Wisconsin produces more cheese than any other state, and they protect that reputation legally. Margarine also faced legal battles in Wisconsin for decades. There was actually a time when margarine was completely illegal in the state to protect the dairy industry. Wyoming makes it illegal to take a photo of a rabbit during June. Why? Probably related to hunting seasons and wildlife protection, but the specificity of the law and the month of June makes it wonderfully weird. For food laws, Wyoming has regulations about wild game meat that are similar to Montana's. If you hunt it, you must use a certain percentage of the meat or face penalties. So, here's what we've learned. America has hundreds of thousands of laws. Many of them are old. Really old, and nobody bothers to remove them from the books, even when they become irrelevant or absurd. Some of these laws had legitimate purposes when they were written: protecting consumers, preventing theft, maintaining public health. Others were moral crusades or religious regulations. And some, honestly, we have no idea what the lawmakers were thinking. But here's the really important part. Most of these laws aren't enforced. You're not going to get arrested for eating fried chicken with a fork in Georgia or for having ice cream in your back pocket in Alabama. Law enforcement has better things to do. But technically, legally, these laws exist, which means in the absolute strangest circumstances, they could theoretically be enforced. And that's what makes them so fascinating. These laws show us how society changes while legal codes lag behind. They're historical artifacts that tell us about what people worried about decades or centuries ago. Horse theft was such a problem that Alabama had to ban ice cream in back pockets. Toad licking was prevalent enough in California that LA had to specifically outlaw it. People were getting moose drunk in Alaska. These laws are windows into bizarre moments in American history, and every single one of these laws is still active, still on the books, still technically enforceable. In the year 2025, you can theoretically be prosecuted for violating any of them if a prosecutor really wanted to make a point, which probably won't happen, but the legal possibility exists. American food laws are a wild mix of consumer protection, outdated morality, bizarre historical incidents, and complete absurdity. From bouncing pickles in Connecticut to drunk moose in Alaska to illegal frog corpses in Florida, these 50 laws prove that America's legal system is full of forgotten weirdness. Some of these laws serve legitimate purposes, many don't, but all of them are technically still active, gathering dusts in legal archives while society moves on. The real question is, why don't we clean up these old laws? The answer is that removing laws from the books requires legislative action. Politicians have to spend time voting to repeal laws, and that time could be spent on new legislation. So old laws just stay there, inactive but present, creating this massive collection of legal oddities. It's easier to ignore them than to officially remove them. But that means somewhere out there, there's probably someone who's technically breaking one of these laws right now without knowing it. Maybe you, maybe someone you know. Are you in Pocatello, Idaho? Eating with a frown. Criminal. Did you cross into Minnesota with a duck on your head? Illegal. Did you sing off-key in North Carolina? Believe it or not, against the law. These laws remind us that America is a country built on rules, regulations, and sometimes absolutely no common sense whatsoever. We love making laws. We love the idea of having rules for everything, but we're terrible at letting go of old rules even when they stop making sense. And that's how you end up with a legal code that includes pickle bouncing tests and anti-toad licking ordinances right alongside actual important legislation. So the next time you're eating food in America, just remember, you might be breaking some obscure law from 1903 that nobody's bothered to repeal. You're probably fine. Probably. But technically, legally, maybe you're a food criminal and you don't even know it. If this was as wild as you thought, hit that next video to see more bizarre laws you won't believe exist.